Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelsey Alberski, and I'm a Learning and Community Engagement Curator at the Vernon Public Art Gallery. And I'm happy to welcome you to another UBCO BFA Grad Artist Talk. So before we begin, I just want to take a moment.
Aiden is speaking.
Sorry? Oh, I'm going to mute and
try to get it online here
for myself. There we go. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that I am currently situated on unceded Syilx territory. And just talk about over the last few weeks, we've been hosting some artist talks for the UBCO BFA grads. Due to COVID-19, their year-end graduation exhibition, Any Moment, is accessible virtually. And so we wanted to offer some virtual artist talks to complement the exhibition. So tonight we are happy to have Aiden with us to share her work. Aiden Devin lives in Kelowna, British Columbia, and completed her Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2020 at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, graduating with the University of BC Okanagan Medal in Fine Arts. So Aiden's work has been shown at the Alternator Center for Contemporary Art in 2018 and 2019, and featured in the Femme Handbook in the 2019 and 2020 issue. She has received the, sorry, I just had to admit some people here. So she's received the Doug Biden Memorial Scholarship in Visual Arts in 2017, the Francis Harris Prize in Fine Arts in 2018, Norma and Jack Aitken Prize in Visual Arts in 2020, and in 2019, she was longlisted for the Lynn Prize. So Aiden has an upcoming exhibition in the Window Gallery at the Alternator Center for Contemporary Art, opening in June 2020. And before I hand it over to Aiden, I just want to let everyone know that I'm going to be turning off your microphones and videos except for Aiden's. And at the very end, we'll have a Q&A period. So if you want to ask a question to Aiden, feel free to turn on your video and your mic and ask it to her. We will be recording this though and posting it to our YouTube channel. So if you do not feel comfortable having your video or audio recorded, you can always use the chat bar as well and ask a question there and I can relay it to her. So without further ado, let's give Aiden a warm virtual welcome and I'll let you take it away.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen and get that started. It looks like I just need access to be able to do that.
I thought I did that. Let me just double check here.
All good.
Okay, try again.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. I'm just gonna play this guy. All right, hopefully everyone can see that and hear me. And so, yeah, like was mentioned, my name's Aiden. I just graduated from UBCO with my BFA and a minor in art history. And I'm so excited to be here and get to talk about my work. Yeah, just the ideas that I've had over the past year in terms of kind of my final year of my undergrad and how they've kind of, I guess, developed and been now portrayed through the paintings that I've created. Yes, so I guess I'll kind of start from the beginning and kind of where some of my imagery is kind of rooted in, or where these ideas kind of were coming from. And so it actually kind of started back in my second year. This is a painting I made in my second year called So Into You. It's 3 by 4 feet acrylic on canvas. And really this was like, I created this in my first ever kind of like time, this first ever like painting class that I was starting to use acrylic paints and really like explore color and learn more about color theory. And I fell in love with it. And I was like, painting, this is like what I want to do. This is awesome. And I was really excited about expressing like emotion through painting and doing a lot of mark making with brushes and with just the material of the paint. And so I was exploring that with this, and I guess to give like a bit of context to the title, which is called So Into You, around this time I was also processing like a very naive little a crush, but while this was happening, I was noticing the way that space was kind of conjuring up memories for me. And so I found myself like when I was in a particular place was when I was like maybe thinking about that person, and it was often associated with like maybe an experience I had with them there, or, you know, a conversation we had, and suddenly I'm like walking in that same place and I'm like overwhelmed with like feeling like I've just been brought back to our conversation. And it fascinated me, and I wanted to kind of be able to express this with paint, and kind of thinking like, how can I, you know, express like the chaotic and the kind of like confusing, you know, overwhelming butterfly feelings of like a crush in a painting. And so that's what I was kind of exploring with this piece, and really thinking about the way that also space was tied into that. So I was, you know, really simplistically, you know, expressing kind of, you know, some walls and a floor and a roof, and referencing that these marks also were existing within a particular place, and kind of also were becoming integrated into the walls and the architecture. Yeah, and this was kind of like my first ever exploration of this kind of idea and thinking about memory tied to space. But it got me really excited about that. I mean, for me, I'm a very emotional person, and I respond to things quite emotionally. And so it wasn't necessarily a new concept thinking about, you know, memories that I had tied to spaces. But I think this was definitely the first time I've ever tried to kind of visually express those ideas. And then into my third year, I made another painting. And this one is called Making Me Melt. And it is also 3x4 feet. And really what I was trying to kind of trying to go off the last painting. So I'd actually kind of stepped away from painting like this and was really exploring, before creating this piece and in between the one I just showed you, just exploring like materiality of paint, and like using a lot of raw canvas, and painting some lines and layering paint, and just very like abstract work that personally just didn't have a lot of like particular meaning behind it in a sense. So I was really excited to kind of jump back into this, and I basically just wanted to re-explore the same ideas of, you know, falling in love for the first time and those crush feelings, and thinking about the way that those things can be tied to specific places. Then particularly with this one, I wanted to explore like more of a particular place in terms of the like more three-dimensional space. And so kind of thinking about how can I get the marks to maybe like ooze down the stairs. And I think it's kind of humorous at the same time, because they're also like, they kind of represent these feelings to me, but they're also very clearly like brush strokes and paint drips. And so I've even had, you know, professors mention like it even just seems like, you know, like a painting like fell off a canvas somewhere and is like oozing down someone's stairs. Like it's kind of also exploring, you know, just painting in itself within these works. So I feel like they kind of have those two sides. And so this was in my third year, so going into my fourth year this last year, yeah, I was really excited about space, but I'd really only explored it through this kind of like lens of, you know, chaotic crush and love feelings. And so something that I was exploring a lot through just other mediums was this idea of home and of childhood, and just really reflecting on, you know, what home means and what architecture means in terms of domestic space. And so what ended up happening is I actually, oh, there we go. Sorry, my key wasn't working. I started reading The Poetics of Space, and this book got me really excited about thinking about space and childhood, and just our emotions that are connected to space and how intertwined they are. And so really what Bachelard, and I'm probably butchering that, but is kind of talking about in this book is he's really reflecting on the idea and the way that, yeah, childhood memories become imprinted in domestic spaces. and the way that our memories and architecture are intertwined and kind of building off of each other, and that we often don't experience space just in as a space, but we experience it emotionally, and how those two things go together. And specifically with domestic spaces, like we're living there, we're growing up there, our self is being developed in this space. And so that in itself is, adds this extra weight to the walls that we're existing in. And there's very like self-defining moments happening within the architecture that also then become almost like imprinted on the walls. And so I was exploring all these ideas, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, how can I like now express this like through a painting and through pieces? And so yeah, I decided to just create some smaller studies. And oh my goodness. Sorry, my keys aren't working. Why is it doing that? There we go. And this is a quote just before I jump ahead and struggle a little bit with my keynote. But from Bachelard, it says, "We comfort ourselves by reliving memories of protection. So something closed must retain our memories while leaving them their original value as images. Memories of the outside world will never have the same tonality as those of home, and by recalling these memories, we add to our stored dreams." So then also thinking a lot about the way that home then also becomes this safe place where you can dream and daydream and explore imagination. And so I was thinking about that a lot as well, and in reflecting on my own memories of home, reflecting on the things that I imagined in those spaces, and allowing my imagination as a painter also to kind of be played with a bit. So kind of exploring all those things. So what I started to do was do some sketches. So I actually went and took some photos of my house, which on the left here, I just printed them off on printer paper and just started to kind of break down the spaces a bit. So I was kind of trying to give myself a basis of like, okay, how can I work through the architecture and also abstract it a little bit and think about color. And so that was kind of a new process for me. I'm not a huge sketcher, and this is, I'm sure people would not even really say this is sketching per se, but I was trying to explore also like this idea of planning. I often was a very and I still am a very a spontaneous painter, and I make moves quickly and decisions really quickly. And so part of this also is to really like dig deep into the material and the ideas that I was learning and figuring out the best way to actually vocalize them through my work. And so what kind of came out of that? And so I actually, during this time, I also was thinking a lot and taking a lot of photos in my house. And so I feel like those kind of influenced some of these sketches and also became a part of the sketching process a lot. Was taking photos. I would journal and just like go and sit in a space and just think about the like memories and write down anything that came to mind that I had, and use that all as material for when I was in the studio painting. And so this was one of the first ones, and this actually is a work that is a part of our grad exhibition, Any Moment, and it's called Her Blue Ball Bounced as They Closed Their Eyes. And these are just small, they're 11 by 14, which was new for me. Like, I really liked painting on like 3 feet by 4 feet, and paintings later on that I'll show are actually much larger. But this was really good. It actually gave me time to kind of think about the space and work a bit quicker, and work freer in the sense that I wasn't so committed to a large canvas. And so I was really with these just exploring spatial marks, and thinking about, like with this one, it was kind of more reflecting on evening and memories of us going to bed. But then also there's the reference, like her blue ball, it was thinking actually about our childhood, our dog. And so, the blue mark actually even being, a representation of, maybe a pattern her ball would have bounced in the space. And so I was kind of exploring like these imaginary things kind of floating around representing stuff, but then also like how people would have physically moved in the space, or an object would have moved in the space, and using that to help me kind of like come up with marks to fill the space with. And so I made about 4 of these, and they've kind of become paintings that I'm using to, and have used to kind of use as sketches for larger pieces. So this one is Coffee is Ready, Don't Be Late. And this one is a bit different. I was thinking a lot more about like morning time, more of something that's soft and quiet. I wanted the marks to be a little bit less rigid and more like flowing, almost like ribbon-like, and kind of filling the space. And then I was also starting to think about like, how could light become something that I was using in my paintings? Because just in general, I find like light plays a huge part in the way we understand architecture. And so I was trying to also include that and also include it in the way that I was making the marks and trying to push them 3-dimensionally. And then here's another one, which is titled We've Come to Disagree About Bacon, which is just kind of a playful reference to the fact that I am a vegetarian in an all-meat eating family. And so kind of thinking about conversations that have happened around that. And I mean, it's funny, I've had people tell me that there's like this one mark in there that kind of actually looks like bacon. So, which was not intentional, but yeah, just thinking a lot about these, like in each little sketch that I was doing, trying to work out these different memories that were also quite different, and kind of going like, how diverse can I be, and how many different emotions could I try to express? And yeah, so I worked on these, and then I actually, I moved on, and I was like, I need to work a little bit bigger, and I wanted to challenge myself a bit more. So I created this piece next, which was titled, Woke Up to a Chore List, I Wish I Was a Unicorn. And I was really trying to, especially in my titles, and in a lot of the pieces, maybe play with a bit of humor and reference maybe the memories that I was exploring in the piece. This one I was just also trying to think more back to, you know, the poetics of space and these ideas of like daydreaming, and that, you know, that the home and domestic space is also just this place that you can kind of let your mind wander, and those thoughts can kind of carry you away. And so it's, you know, naturally, like on, you know, in our house when growing up, like you on Saturday morning, you often woke up to a chore list. And so I was trying to play with that idea of like, you know, when you're doing chores, you're kind of like, oh, like, I just want to be anywhere but doing this right now. And so trying to kind of almost, you know, make it imaginative and referencing architecture, but in a really simplistic way, maybe referencing like outdoors, or kind of this like in-between space between, you know, inside and outside. Yeah, and kind of also maybe pushing this idea of the marks maybe integrating with each other a bit more, and flowing in and out of each other. Because I find that's something that's also so fascinating about memories that are in spaces, is like, it's not just we often don't have one specific memory tied to a space, at least with homes, like we live every day there. And so we have like each day there's new memories being built up in these spaces. And so that was something that I also wanted to push myself with more, was just, yeah, like how can these memories or these marks that I'm making represent memories of different times, and how can they be more intertwined in that as well visually. And so someone who during this time kind of painting that quite influenced me in some of these next works was actually an artist named Katie Pratt. And she does these oil paintings that are so beautiful. And honestly, a lot of times when I'm kind of stuck, I often will like go and look at her work. And something that also fascinates me about her work is just her process and the way that she's painting. And that was something that I really wanted to apply to my own process as I was kind of trying to figure it out. Like I was really struggling at times with, okay, I need to kind of have some sketches going or something to kind of ground me in my pieces, but then also kind of wanting to be spontaneous and wanting to just paint and not really plan too much. And what I find so interesting about the way that Katie works is that she often starts really chaotic, and she's kind of creating her works kind of from chaos and then making them into these kind of very meticulous systemic orders. And it just comes over time as the paint is being layered on, and a system is being created as paint is being added to the painting. And so I wanted to apply that to my paintings, and I feel like it took me a little while until kind of the last paintings that I'll show you, before I kind of got this idea of building up a system in terms of my process down, or I don't even know if I have it down. It's like, I feel like I think I have it down, and then I make something and I totally don't. So, but it was super inspiring to see her work, and I just wanted to show it and reference it because she's a great painter. Oh, there we go. So one of the pieces I actually worked on next was this piece called OMG, this quiz says he defs likes you. And this is one of my larger works, and this is a size that I'm like, I love painting this size, it's so great. I live in a small apartment now, so I don't know how feasible this size will be, but we'll see. But it's 5 by 4 feet, and I am only 5'2", so it's basically the same height as me, which I actually love because it means that my painting process is a lot more physically involved, and it takes a lot more of like me actually like moving my arms and you know, like I'll have the painting on the ground and I'm pouring and I'm having to like reach over it, and it's a lot more of a physical act, which I actually really enjoy in terms of painting. But with this one, I really wanted to let go a little bit. I was feeling in terms of kind of like progressing and making these works, I was feeling a little bit stuck in my size. So I was like, I'm just gonna go big, I'm just gonna do it. And then I was feeling a little bit like, oh, I feel like I'm just making the same marks over and over again. Like I'm just taking a paintbrush and I'm making a little like kind of squiggle mark, and then I'm making another one. And so I was really challenged with, you know, adding more marks and more unique marks to my mark vocabulary that I could kind of pull from. And yeah, really thinking also about how can I like use the materiality of the paint a little bit more. I mean, sometimes acrylic paint is not always the most pleasant to work with, but I love it because it dries so fast and it's so, you can work so quickly with it. So you can kind of like pour something and then come back to it in a couple hours and it's completely dried and you can paint around it or paint over it. And then I was also starting to explore mediums a lot more. So, and actually just like pouring the medium onto my canvas and then mixing the paint onto the actual surface. And then I did a lot of like recycling bin digging to find like large pieces of cardboard that I could like use as a squeegee and kind of like pull the paint across the surface. Yeah, I just was trying to kind of, you know, make some more interesting marks that were maybe a little bit weird. One of my favorite marks in this painting is the like bright pink kind of like, almost feels like a living little creature, but, and it was just like me pouring down the paint and then kind of like tilting my canvas around. But it's so interesting and it's a lot more unique than just kind of a regular brush stroke. And so it got me really excited about like what I could kind of do with paint and being a little bit more experimental. And in terms of thinking about like, you know, the ideas around this particular painting, like I was also really interested in just thinking like, okay, this one was kind of referencing like sleepovers I would have had. And like for us, I can totally remember like with friends, like taking quizzes out of like teen magazines and going down, you know, like, and it would tell you like if your crush liked you or not. And so I was kind of thinking about that and just like the buzz that comes from, you know, hanging out with your friends and it's like 2 a.m. and you were supposed to go to bed like 4 hours ago and but you're wide awake. And so kind of like having that memory as what I was kind of working with, I feel like I was also able to kind of like be a little bit free, a little bit like dramatic, because it totally just, I feel like fit with the kind of memory that I was trying to express. And then at the same time, I was working on another piece. Here's just a few photos of kind of up close of the paint. And what I was doing, I was really, trying to, just be a little bit more free with it and kind of like slapping it on there, for lack of a better word, and like kind of letting it dry and then tilting it and letting it fold over on itself. So this was another piece that I was making at the same time as the OMG painting, and it's called I Always Have to Do the Dishes, No You Don't. And totally referencing, I was thinking about memories with my siblings. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so we would argue about doing the dishes like every single night. And so I wanted to kind of go back to exploring architecture, but then like I was in my other ones, but then being a little bit more strict to myself in terms of the marks I was making, because I kind of was like, okay, Aiden, you can have like a crazy painting, and then this one, let's try to like rein it in. Let's try to like use crazy marks, but also not let it get too out of control. And I also wanted to play with light a little bit more again on a larger scale. So I was thinking about that as well, like on the left-hand side, kind of like light that maybe is coming from another window. And I would say also with this one is kind of when I started to explore like doorways or arches, and thinking about spaces that are like kind of like are referencing other spaces. And so it wasn't just a simple like 2 walls and you're only in this one room, but maybe you're like moving, almost like the painting is kind of this in like this doorway between a few rooms. And the way that like we move around space a bit more, and then also being able to kind of be more experiment more with like how can I try to make a paint mark like look like it's going around a corner or something. And so kind of a process on this work. It actually started on the left. There is actually just like a photo I took on my phone of kind of the architecture in the stairway that I was referencing. And then there on the right was kind of like my background painting. And it did change a little bit. You'll see in like the final one, but that's kind of where I was starting and trying to just break it down into architectural planes and just solid blocks of color. And then Photoshop has not been my like, best tool to use, but I started to use it a lot recently for doing sketches really quickly. And it's really great. You can like take a photo of your painting and I just like quickly sketch over it with paintbrush, and I can kind of figure out color and things like that. So this was a Photoshop sketch that I had done of this piece. And here it is again. So thinking about just space and I'm really excited about this one personally, and I feel like it has a lot of really interesting movements in it. In particular, like the kind of pinky red mark on the bottom was so fun to make. I just had actually mixed the paint up on the canvas and then used some cardboard and some medium like mixed in it, and kind of I don't know, just kind of like spread the paint around. And it was kind of like I was crossing my fingers that it would work, and it's one of my favorite marks. And so I have to kind of keep practicing to nail that mark down, because I feel like it was a little bit of a fluke. But so moving on, another piece that I made after that is called Mascara in My Eye, Crying Because I'm Pretty. Playing with humor a little bit. I was thinking this is actually based off of a space in my bathroom. And so I have some kind of photos of some sketches I was using when I was creating this piece. And so it actually started from a sketch that I had made like right at the very beginning of the year. And I always found my bathroom kind of interesting architecturally. It's kind of like this little nook that is kind of under the stairs, and there's like kind of interesting wall shapes happening. But then I was also just interested in it in terms of like the memories I had in that space, because I have memories of it being like, just a generic like place where you go, you brush your teeth, like you leave, like you don't really feel like you have emotions tied to it because you just kind of come and go. But then I've also have had experiences where I was like crying on the floor in my bathroom. And so it's kind of this interesting space where there's things kind of intertwined, like the mundane with like heartbreak and things like that. And so I kind of was exploring that, and I actually made a smaller piece. This one's 11 by 14. One of the smaller ones I made I called him Crying, Then Brushed My Teeth. So yeah, referencing the like, yeah, those mundane things, and how they're also so tied to like, to our experiences of like really, I guess just really deep experiences. This one, like, yeah, referencing like a breakup, and then I went to bed, and it all kind of existed in this one space. And so thinking about that, and thinking about Mark. So I was excited about the composition of this piece, so I wanted to make it larger. So that's what I did in this piece, and it turned into this. Something I think that started to happen with this work and kind of the works that follow it, is the way I was kind of approaching my process. And I feel like it changed a lot in these next paintings. But I was being challenged to think about the way that I was creating space, because as you could see in previous works, like I was kind of just painting the background and then painting marks on top of it. And often like there's a bit of a disconnect between the two things. And for me, like I was super and am super interested in the way that architecture and memory are so like interconnected. And so I was like, I need to visually express this more. And so I started to kind of create planes out of marks, add just more texture to the walls and to the surfaces that I was depicting, but also keep a sense of dimensionality and of just plain old surfaces to the painting. And then I was also kind of embracing Katie Pratt's process of like making a mark and then, immediately, and then responding to that mark with another mark. And so kind of these pink marks in the middle, those were marks that I had was just kind of within a certain amount of time, and them not drying was kind of just building on the layers. And so I made the darker pink mark, and then I immediately like did the other mark, and then I did another mark on top of that, and to the way that they felt like they were kind of weaving into each other. Often, the way memories are and that kind of thing. And so kind of going into from that and kind of wanting to challenge myself with the way I was representing architecture and the way that I, was also just the way I was creating my paintings. I decided to kind of like ditch the process of kind of sketching out architecture right away, and actually just start painting marks first and kind of doing them at the same time. And this was suggested to me, and I think it challenged me a lot, and it changed my process a lot. And I still want to explore this a lot more in my work, and kind of find a balance between representing architecture and then also having the marks really be the defining thing in the works. But this one, like in the photo on the left, you can kind of see like I made a green mark, and it was just right on my primed canvas, and it was like terrifying to do. I was like, oh no, like now what do I do? Like everything's white, and now I have to like build a space around this. But it was really good for me to, I think, challenge myself to kind of think outside of the box in terms of space and what space was. And also with these works, I was trying to think more about, I guess, broaden my idea of domestic space, because all my works were really based on, indoor spaces. And so I think from there, I was kind of thinking, okay, now what about outdoor spaces? And that idea was kind of brought up to me. And I wanted to challenge myself with that, like our backyard, with window spaces and with neighborhoods and these places that I would also consider like them being a domestic space because I grew up in them. I have this familiarity with the streets that I grew up on and, the neighborhood houses, and, the backyard and the kind of landscape that's in it. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit more and push myself that way. And here, so what actually happened in the one piece that I'll kind of show you the final product after, but I started to also kind of edit out marks and I actually create like painting around it. And it was kind of interesting. It also created a newer mark that felt a bit more collaged. But it was kind of an exciting like realization that I could edit these and I could like make a mark. And then if I really loved the mark and I hated the space, I could actually like go and paint out the space and keep the mark that I loved and rebuild the space around it so that it makes sense. So it's kind of a cool journey and kind of realizing these different ways that I can actually sketch while I was creating and while I was making things. And so this final piece here was called Found a Salamander in a Ditch and Kept It as a Pet, which is actually a reference to a memory that I have when I was growing up. And we had this big ditch in the front of our lawn, and in the spring, like it would rain so much, and so there would be salamanders in there. And one time, me and one of my friends had caught one, and we'd been trying really hard to, and we finally did, and we kept it as a pet. And I don't remember what happened to it after that, like if it died or if we were like, our parents made us put it back, or I don't actually remember, but I do remember catching it and we were so excited and we would like, take turns taking care of it. But anyways, so I was kind of thinking about that and thinking about like, how can I reference that memory in an abstract way? So like for this one, also thinking like, how can I make the marks a bit kind of gross maybe, or referencing water? Can they be kind of feel like this, indoor outdoor space, because I'm also referencing outside, but then I'm also, part of the memory then flows into like keeping it as a pet and bringing it inside. And so thinking about that maybe as like memories that are kind of representing memories in like multiple ways or in as they've kind of progressed. Like in this one, like the green marks, I was thinking even about like just it's like gross water in your ditch, and it's like the green grass, and so like maybe I can represent that a little bit, and exploring that, but then also breaking down the space. So I was like making marks and then painting over them, and then taping. I do a lot of taping so that I can get nice clean lines, and so doing that, like taping off a space that I'm like, okay, this is really working, and I want to paint over the rest and that kind of thing. And then I have another one here that I also did kind of around the same time as this one, which is called Grape Popsicles Are My Least Favorite Popsicle. And this one in particular, I was thinking a lot about architecture and thinking about like our back deck, which has this like really particular kind of arch or like kind of top of the deck. I'm totally like blanking out on a proper name for it. But there's kind of like these little slats that you could look through and kind of see the sky. And so I was like, okay, can I kind of reference those arches, I guess, or the architecture of the deck, but in a super abstract way. Like, I don't think if you actually went to my parents' house and saw that deck, you would actually see the architecture in it. But I wanted to kind of represent this like kind of peering into another space, and thinking a lot about outside. And then what got me excited was I was like, oh, if it's like popsicles, like in the summer you're eating a popsicle and it's like dripping down your fingers because it's like melting in the hot sun. And it's, it's like you got it on the porch, so then you have to like take water and like, dump that on the porch because otherwise it's going to get sticky. So I was like thinking about all these actions and all these things, and how I could like represent that in paint. And it was really fun because I could do a lot of pouring, and kind of adding mediums so that the paint was really glossy and kind of almost like maybe it felt a little bit sticky, and kind of representing that like kind of summer, like those sweet treats that are just pure sugar, and when they're melted down, like they're just a mess. And so I was excited to kind of almost represent that through the abstracted marks, and represent this memory that I kind of had, and the feelings that were associated with it in summertime and that kind of thing. And so I have a few more. So I was working on another one at this time, which is, this one's titled I Left My Gum by the Pool. And this one was a little bit more simple in the architecture, which I wanted to challenge myself with in terms of having just more simple planes. Definitely, I think this one was a bit more of an experiment, and I would want to kind of work more with three-dimensional architecture, or at least references to three-dimensionality, with the planes that I'm representing. But it was thinking a lot about similar things. That was a theme. I was kind of making these all at the same time. So I was just really wanting it to be summer, I think. But thinking about, sweets and, like the colors of candies and things too are like so vibrant. And so even that, or I was like, okay, bubblegum pink, like I could have that in the painting, and kind of like the stickiness of it. And like when you like pull it apart, it's kind of stringy. And so how could I kind of show that in a painting? So I was kind of working through that in this piece. And then another piece I was kind of making at a similar time, just to kind of keep processing ideas, was Built a Blanket for and Kissed in It. And just thinking, with this one I was trying to explore, like, and I feel like this one is actually one that I'm like, I kind of want to work on a little bit more. We'll see, I have it turned around for right now to give it a break. But seeing it again now, I'm like, oh, I could work on it more. But think, how could I add maybe pattern into my paintings a bit more? I'm excited about the idea of maybe adding maybe more references to objects. Because I think what's really cool is all these ideas also totally are tied into like the objects we have in our houses that hold nostalgia, and like we have memories tied to things. I mean, that's why like we keep objects often, because they hold meaning for us. They're special. They're symbolic of something. So not only the spaces, but then also thinking about maybe objects that even just like textures of things, or maybe a pattern in something that could be included into the painting in terms of referencing that particular memory or that particular moment that I'm trying to reflect on. So yeah, that's kind of all I had to share. That's kind of what I'm working on. I'm still painting. I'm working on a commission piece right now. That's 5 feet by 4 feet. So going back large, and I'm still kind of in the sketching process, so I would have shown you more photos, but all there is like a red square, so it's not super exciting, but working on that and thinking about it. And then like was mentioned, I do have a show that's opening on June 12th in the window gallery of the Alternator Center. So if you're in Kelowna, you could totally go check that out. But I guess I can just open it up to questions, and if people have comments or questions, they can let me know. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Aiden.
Should I stop screen sharing or should I leave it up?
Up to you.
Okay. Maybe I'll leave it up for now. I'll see.
Deal. So yeah, feel free to turn on your video and audio to ask Aiden a question, or you can use the chat bar, which you can find on the bottom there, to ask in there as well.
I'll stop it so I could see people's faces if they show.
Well, I have a question. So I find your work, there's definitely this sense of playfulness and humor, and your color palette kind of matches that. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your color palette. Like, that's just my interpretation, but why do you choose the colors you choose, and what inspires you with that?
Yeah, color palette's definitely been something that I think I'm gonna be constantly having to refine and challenge myself with, because I think it's very easy for me to like just have it go off. But I think a lot of my colors, I'm thinking a lot about childhood, and the colors that maybe are like on toys, colors that are like, for some of the more recent ones, like I was thinking about like, candy or popsicles or and that kind of thing. And I find a lot of them are also referencing more kind of happy or playful memories just in general. So I think in that sense, then the colors also tend to just be a little bit lighter, maybe a bit more, like just more vibrant in certain ones, just because I'm also trying, I'm kind of representing like humorous, but also good memories. Like they're not, I talk about like us arguing about dishes, but I'm reflecting on it in like a funny way that, rather than that was a negative memory, I guess. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that too, for myself, I think I want to challenge myself on more in terms of refining it, and maybe being sometimes a bit more intentional about a color, because sometimes it definitely is also just, I compositionally am really liking the way the colors are working together. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
What you mentioned that certain types of paint cause you to paint faster. Can you comment on how things like other things that affect speed, like deadlines or paint types or something, affect your artistic outcomes versus ones where you have a lot where you proceed at much slower rates, either through months or in terms of just having to work through something before the paint becomes unworkable?
Yeah. So I think in terms of thinking about the reason I chose acrylic was because I was excited about how quickly I could work, because I was finding, I was kind of sketching as I was going, or I was editing my paintings as I was going. And so if I was using, say, like oil paints or something, those take a lot longer to dry. And so I wanted to be able to kind of like come back to it the next day. And if I want to like completely repaint the surface, I could. And so that was part of my decisions in terms of materials and using acrylic. I think, I've developed this work and really been investing in it in school. And so I think it will be an interesting challenge for myself in terms of thinking I guess creating my own deadlines and working, without something necessarily being due in a couple weeks. I think what might be challenging with that too is just even knowing when something's done. I find sometimes it's hard to completely discern if the painting is finished or not. So, and that's why I like to work on multiple at the same time. I'll often try to have like 3 paintings on the go at once, so that I could, when I was kind of working through something with one and I was like frustrated, my process didn't have to stop. I could actually turn it around or put it in somewhere else, and then I could work on a new painting, and process that. And then sometimes through working on something else, I actually can come back to it and be like, oh, I totally know what to do now, or yeah, so I hope that kind of answers
Mhm.
your question.
Yep.
I see Amy has a hand up if you want to ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
No, I just really love your titles, your painting titles, and I was curious if you come up with those after you've finished the painting, or as you go, kind of as you're working on it, or yeah.
Yeah, they kind of, usually they kind of at the same time as I'm making the painting. I'll try to kind of come up with maybe, I often would have sticky notes around my studio, and so I would, put a sticky note up on the wall of the memory I was thinking of. And then as time was kind of going on and as I was painting, then I would kind of develop the title and try to make it a bit quirkier, or a bit more humorous. So like with the sleepover one, like I definitely just wrote like sleepover with friends, and that was probably like my first sticky note, or like my first thought around it. And then I was trying to think, okay, well, what could I maybe reference that would be kind of funny, or like the way that I'm writing it maybe would reference like the way that we would have talked to each other, or so I was definitely like using a lot of sticky notes and just kind of rewriting them as they were going, which actually helped me keep direction in my paintings too, because I was able to like have something to kind of like bring me back to like, okay, this is kind of my ideas, or if I was feeling stumped, I could go back to my title idea, and yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Aiden. It's Broward.
Good.
How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry I came in a little late, and Amy just stole my question. Oh, but it was a good question. I'm wondering if you've ever thought of taking a certain instance or a certain memory and making a multitude of paintings from that, and to see what you could tease out of different versions of the same basic idea.
I think that's a really good idea. Like I haven't done it before, and I feel like we probably have talked about that idea a little bit in my process of making these last year, or but I think maybe where I kind of did it was when I took the I called him Crying and then brushed my teeth, like the smaller one, and then used the similar composition. I mean, that would be a good challenge to myself even this summer, of being like, okay, I'm gonna like reflect on this memory and try to like tease it out in different ways, or like refine it more. No, I haven't, but I do really like that idea. So
yeah, I wonder if there would be an interesting morphing of the memory by exploring it through different kinds of visual means. But
yeah. Well, I think someone brought that up to me too one time, of like, it's interesting because they always say like, as you remember something, then it becomes like you're remembering the memory of the thing, like it becomes more and more distorted over time. So even just be interesting, like if I'm reflecting on the same thing, like how much maybe that my first painting would change from like the last painting I did of that same thing, just because now I'm involved, like now my memories are associated with like just the painting process and thinking about color, and like, it would be interesting.
oh, cool.
Awesome. You have a question in the chat from Miranda. She says, does the space that you were in while working on the painting inform the work?
That's a good question. It hasn't. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Or maybe it has, I guess. I was creating these at school in the studio. So, but I was thinking a lot about home, and I was living at home still. And so I was like reflecting on childhood memories, but then also I was still living in the space that I was painting about and reflecting on. And so, I mean, that was kind of interesting, but I think what happened then was I was able to kind of step away from the house and think about just the painting itself. At points, like I kind of was rooted in these ideas of memory, but then when I went into the studio, I was also able to think just like more technically about the paint because I wasn't physically there. But then I actually, because the school closed, like I ended up actually painting in my bedroom. And so that was one, just interesting to navigate, like in terms of space and being faced with your paintings, like every time you wake up and go to sleep. But yeah, and making them in the same space. I don't know if it really changed my process too much because I feel like I still am trying to be pretty abstract in the way that I'm representing the memories. Yeah, and like now I'm not living in that house anymore, and so I mean, I guess I'll just kind of see as I am away from that space at like how my memories of it change and how my paintings might change based on it. And now I have new spaces to kind of reflect on. Yeah.
Hey, Aiden. I was wondering, you have a lot of your stuff is from thinking like quite a bit past that you're painting. Do you ever have something that happens that's like you're kind of in the moment and you think, oh man, this, like I can picture myself already painting about this, and this is what I think it would feel like or look like? Or
I haven't. I was really exploring a lot, like past memories, but that has been something I've been thinking about now that I'm not living in the space where I grew up, and so and I guess also, yeah, and thinking about, I mean, that would just be an interesting, like, you know, thing to add to the way that I'm creating work, maybe, is even just like, oh, like maybe I am being more intentional about journaling certain moments or journaling certain experiences as kind of like this store of memories that I can actually reflect on when I'm painting, or looking for memories to paint and stuff. So yeah, they've mostly been based in the past, and I think what could be interesting is even like kind of having the two, like, because, you know, my memories from the past are also now like affecting, you know, how I see things now and how I'm experiencing things now. And yeah, so even a space and kind of having two layers of memories in paintings might be interesting. Yeah.
that's true, kind of the past and present, how you feel now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll ask another question. Have you ever thought about exploring maybe more darker memories or depressing memories, or are you happy with just the happier, playful side of things?
I have. I found it kind of hard, to be honest, and maybe there's something in me that I'm just like not fully comfortable like going there or reflecting, or I don't, like, maybe there's more to that, but yeah, I think at this point, and what I'm more excited about processing are these more maybe playful memories. I think maybe what I could try do is incorporate some maybe more maybe darker or more some of the harder experiences tied in, because I think like reflecting on a lot of these are like very personal reflections of memories that I'm thinking about in my own life. And so the reality is like I do have, you know, darker, hard memories, but they're also very intertwined with really like beautiful, joyous ones. And so maybe it also takes me either just like, you know, braving it and going there and painting those things. I think partly I'm also like, it's such a, I find painting is a very, like I'm spending a lot of time reflecting on those memories and things. And so in general, I don't know, maybe I'm scared to like spend 40 hours like or more reflecting on something really hard through a painting, but maybe it would be really good for me. I don't know. And I think I also want my work to I don't know if this is like maybe cheesy, but like be some like also be reflections of good and joyful memories for other people. So I don't know. I think I would have to have a balance of it, and not completely like just do dark pieces or. And maybe that's something to challenge myself is like, how can I try to make these, you know, playful, but just also realistic of like, sometimes life is really hard and yeah, I don't want to like make it out to be this like light and airy kind of a thing, I guess.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions, anybody? Okay, speak now or forever hold your peace. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aiden. We, on behalf of Vernon Public Art Gallery, just really thank you for your time and just taking time to share your work with us and speak about it. And thank you everyone who's participated. We will be posting this video to our YouTube, so if you want to check it out or share it with anybody, feel free. This is our last in our UBCO BFA series, unfortunately. So yeah, that's it from us regarding that, and that's all. Thanks, Aiden.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for everyone coming. Yeah, it's super exciting and encouraging to see people coming out. Yeah.